Hello you guys, welcome back to another video. I know it's been a little bit, but I am looking forward to talking about today's topic with you all and hopefully hear from you in the comments, give some of your thoughts on what I'm talking about today. In the past 2 years, I have gone on my own process of deconverting from Christianity, which was the religion my upbringing. If you want a little more background and information on why that happened, you can go back to that video if you haven't seen it. But I have been reflecting on just some of the changes that I have undergone in my worldview and just different things that have shifted over time along with that change of leaving that religion. And so I wanted to talk about some of that today, primarily focusing on how my worldview has been able to shift quite a bit just with leaving behind certain religious ideas and ways of seeing the world. So within Christianity, there is this idea, a very important part of Christian teaching and the Christian worldview, if you will, that human beings are inherently flawed and corrupt, and to a lot of, according to a lot of Christian theology, like outright bad, just due to the doctrine of original sin and things like that. We are really taught and encouraged to think of ourselves as fundamentally bad and not enough, and how that's supplemented and turned into this hopeful message is that God brings us worth, God provides his grace, and therefore we're saved by him. And so fundamentally you're given this idea that you are not enough and you never will be without God and without his grace and redemption. And so what this does is this really leads to a lot of religiously fueled existential guilt over time for a lot of people who may be believers or who were once believers. It devalues who you are as a human being when you're told that without God and his immense love and mercy and acceptance of you, you don't even have a right to exist. You deserve nothing. It's very intentional about eroding any sense of goodness or well-being about ourselves without God. Like the idea is without God we can derive no good, we can be no good, which of course is a very heavy message to promote to people, and a very heavy self-image to have, that without God and this all-powerful being, you are nothing. You held no potential for good without God's grace and things like that. And I understand like different denominations and depending on your interpretation of scripture in the Bible, this may look a little different. However, I find that that is the very prevalent view running across those groups' interpretations. Original sin is largely understood to be a core concept running throughout scripture and Christian history, and it explains all the flaws we see in the world today, which conveniently blames human beings for living in a world where they're prone to sin, but they're also to blame for it. Like if it's inherently in our nature to be sinful, you would think on some level you would receive some compassion for that or consideration, because it was not in our control to be prone to sin like this narrative is telling us, and yet we're also to blame for it, and it completely dismisses God's responsibility and role in causing all of that. So what can follow from this is that we are held responsible as human beings for the sin and mistakes we will inevitably make due to our nature and how we were literally born and came into the world. However, at the same time, even while we are fully responsible for these things, we are also utterly dependent on God for continued existence, for worth, for a sense of meaning and purpose, for direction and guidance, all of it, for authority. We are somehow kept in this weird space where we have responsibility over here for everything we do or do not do correctly or rightly. And yet over here, we're also completely dependent on God and are nothing without him and are capable of no good without him. which we could poke a lot of holes in there, but even saying that and putting it that way, I think makes it pretty apparent how pretty contradictory that really is. And it really puts human beings in a place where we don't really have as much of a choice. The whole Christian idea of free will, that's why I really think if your view of Christian teaching and believing in God is aligning with what I've said so far, maybe you just disagree that it's actually a contradiction or it's actually bad, but you agree with all of those ideas I've stated, and yet you also believe in the idea of Christian free will. I can't help but think that in that sense, the Christian idea of free will is very much an illusion, because if someone's mercy and love and acceptance is offered to you, and if you say no, and if you reject that mercy, you don't want it for any number of reasons, if the only alternative is a lot of suffering, eternal suffering potentially, for saying that no and not accepting that mercy or goodwill from some being or person, that's not mercy, and that's not loving. That's coercion. It's very coercive. If your option is accept my mercy and my goodwill and the good things I have to offer you, and if you don't, here's what awaits you: a lot of suffering, a lot of pain. That's not loving to me, and that's not merciful. Mercy and compassion, love can be offered, and if it's not accepted by another, then that should be accepted. But it's not in this whole conceptualization of the world. It's not by the Christian image of God. And it's sad that that's kind of seen as this beautiful, merciful, loving thing God did. And I would agree, or I could agree, if there wasn't the punishment that can follow when you don't accept what God has to say and what God has to offer you. If there's no punishment involved, okay, yeah, we actually do have free will to accept that if we so choose or not. But that's not the case. That's not the mainstream Christian understanding of all of this. And so with moving away from all of that, deconstructing, deconverting from a lot of things I grew up with, and moving away from all of it, what I've really been able to do is let go of ideas like that, ideas that are so self-limiting and putting you in this box where you are dependent on this higher being for everything to make decisions. Like, if you want to be the best Christian and believer you can be, it necessitates you to rely on God for everything. And the idea is the more connected and closer you are with God, the more and more reliant and dependent you are on Him for virtually everything. And I would argue there's not a lot of room for freedom in that. And it can lead to a very, very narrowed worldview. And so with me moving away from all of that, what I've found is I have opened up a lot more, because I'm not attached to the sinfulness narrative about human beings anymore. Yes, I can recognize that human beings have potential for evil, and we are capable of doing a host of really bad things. We're also capable, though, of a lot of good, and that's what seems to be overlooked with things like this. Is human beings do not need a belief in God. They don't need a religion to be a good person or to make efforts to do good in the world. And so with leaving that sinfulness narrative behind, with leaving behind this hyper dependence on an idea of God, it's allowed me to try to actually see my actions as a reflection of myself, and to start really examining certain behaviors as my fault, or I am culpable for what I do or don't do that affects other people or affects myself and my well-being. And so I've been able to take accountability for that, and I'm okay with being responsible for that. But I don't have the guilt that goes with that of this is who you are. This is in your very nature. Like, you are just prone to sin, and without God's redemption, salvation, you'll never get past that, and you will never be anything more than these bad things about you. Like, I don't need to see things that way anymore, and it's been really eye-opening. I feel like I see the world through a much wider lens now, and I'm just a lot more open. My heart is just open to a lot more authentic, genuine things, and walking into situations and meeting people more so where they're at, because I'm not confined by this very, very specific, narrow idea of what's right or wrong according to a very structured religious view. And so I feel way more open. I have a lot more acceptance and understanding for other people, and interestingly enough also for myself, with owning some of these things that maybe I need to work on, just as all of us do. It's been amazing to be able to do that, and I would have never expected that leaving some of these things behind would help me to be, oh, that's my cat. Leaving some of these things behind would help me to be a more accepting person, even of myself, not only others, but of myself, and to have a more realistic perspective on the flaws I do have and the mistakes I make, and to take accountability for them, but also not to drag myself through the mud that I might have given into temptation and sinned again because I'm just that crappy of a human being, which, again, bare bones, that's what a lot of the mainstream Christian interpretations of this sort of thing is saying. Not to speak for all Christians, because there is a lot of diversity of belief and interpretation within Christianity. I don't want to discount that, but I am talking about where the more mainstream understanding of such things as original sin and sinfulness in human beings, and our dependence on God, stuff like that, that is fairly prevalent for a lot of Christians, not all. It just can be incredibly harmful, and I've been lucky enough to see that moving away from those things has immensely opened up my worldview. It's helped me be compassionate to others and myself, and to just become more accepting and realistic about other people's limitations as well as my own. In addition to this, it's actually been really, really wonderful, because I am a lot more human-centered now with my worldview, and yes, I can recognize people's flaws and all of our limitations as human beings, but it is really wonderful that we are able to do the good we do and exist on this world in the state we are, and I have a lot of appreciation for that. That is very new, that I didn't have before as a believer, not in the same sense that I do now, but I actually feel a lot more connected to other people through this increased understanding. Again, just the acceptance that has really, really grown in me over the past couple of years, and just really wanting to work on those things has been really, really fantastic, just in helping me continue to try to develop and grow as a person. So that's been really, really wonderful. So yeah, I think another thing is I've mentioned, like, this also helped me to take a more realistic worldview on other people as well as myself and our limits as human beings. And something that a author talked about, Ernest Becker, in The Denial of Death, which is an amazing read, by the way. It's a lot. It's a very heavy read. I had to take it chunk by chunk. But in this book, he is talking about how for a lot of people, the structure of religion, whether the religious beliefs themselves are true or not, that aside, how religion seems to function for a lot of people is because human beings are intrinsically and deep down, like, aware of our limitations. Like, we have consciousness, we have a lot of amazing abilities, but we're also very limited, especially in terms of our mortality. And what religion often does and functions as for us is it allows us to see ourselves reflected in this image of an all-powerful, knowing God who we can identify with through these religious structures. And so it kind of does away with this problem of facing our own mortality, that we are unable to achieve on our own. And through God, we can achieve this idea of immortality, maybe through heaven, but also more especially just in being connected to this higher power. And so I thought that was very interesting, because I think that ties really and connects really well with what I'm saying. That for me personally, moving away from religion has helped me to be a little more realistic about thinking about things like my own mortality and my limitations as a human being and the limitations of others. And consequently, that's been leading to a lot of acceptance and a lot of compassion. I really appreciate if you guys made it this far in the video today. I hope some of what I said might have resonated with you or helped in some way, especially if you guys are on your own deconstruction or deconversion journey with religion. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I also hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, as does my sweet sleepy cat Biscuit. I also hope that in some way this video was able to get across that each one of us have a lot of amazing potential and a lot of good in ourselves, and I really just encourage all of you to see that and look for that in yourselves as well as other people. I think we can fixate on, you know, the things we're not doing right, or just all the crazy stuff going on in the world and in our lives, and we need to remember to also be gentle with ourselves and remember all the amazing capabilities we have and the potential for good. So Biscuit believes in you and so do I. I hope you guys have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.